It is Monday, January 2nd. Happy New Year, everyone. This is the Wiltfong Whiparound. I'm your host, Lance Glenn, joined alongside by the Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. And Steve, you are live in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl. So many commitments are going to happen during the game next week. You have tons of information on all the kids announcing, as well as some of the kids that you look forward to seeing in the All-American Bowl. We're going to discuss those here on today's show. And let's start with the kids that are planning on making their announcements at the game. And the first one, Malik Elzy. What are you hearing about Elzy, where he's currently sitting with his recruitment, and which teams are in the mix as he prepares to make a decision?
Yeah, so I like the way this one is trending for Illinois for the future Cincinnati commit. Malik Elzy out of Chicago Simeon High helped lead them to a city championship as a senior. Also plays for the Midwest Boom 7-on-7 team, a 6'3", 200-pound pass catcher that I thought was had a terrific showing at the Overtime OT7 event this summer, Lance, competing against some of the best prospects in the country. This is one of the best one-on-one ball catchers in the country. He tracks the football well downfield. He's a physical presence that if the football is anywhere near his catch radius, you can count on him pulling it down. And this is kind of an important recruiting class for Illinois, Lance, as they try and take this program another step forward after an 8-4 season going into their bowl game here. But when you look at the top of their class, I think they have a lot of guys that could be difference makers on the offensive side of the football. And this was an offense that ranked number 70 nationally and number 95 passing offense. And they really struggled to score points too, which is kind of disappointing because they boasted one of the best defenses in college football, number 2 in total defense, number 1 in scoring defense. But I think when you look at Illinois with the type of class that they can the type of class they're putting together, and if they can add Malik Elzy to Kanari Wiltshire, who's a 5'11", 165-pound playmaker from the state of Florida, who runs sub-11 in the 100-meter dash and turned 58 catches into over 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns as a senior. Also a defensive standout that had close to 50 tackles. I think Colin Dixon, who's a 6'2", 205-pound pass catcher out of the state of Ohio, who had over 200 career receptions, over 3,500 receiving yards, 45 touchdowns, also 143 tackles, 11 forced fumbles, 5 sacks. Illinois is getting a lot of really good football players in this class. Caden Fegan's a 6'3", 221-pound specimen from in-state that Notre Dame was a team trending for early in his recruitment that could play running back or linebacker. So this is a sneaky good class for Illinois, full of really good football players. Malik Elzy would be another terrific addition as they battle Wisconsin and some others down the stretch.
Yeah, and we saw what Brett Bielema was able to do in year 1 with the Fighting Illini, and he's obviously trying to build on that, go even higher in year 2. In year 3, we saw what he could do in year 2. Now we're going to see what he could do in year 3 this coming season. Malik Elzy would obviously be a big piece of this recruiting class. We know Illinois can run the ball. Chase Brown is one of the best, maybe even the best running back in college football, but obviously they have to upgrade that passing offense, and Malik Elzy would go a long way in doing that. Another guy we've talked about extensively on the show, I know you're a big fan of him, Mikael Harrison, pilot out of the state of Texas. He's announcing at the All-American Bowl. And we've talked TCU anytime we've brought him up. Do you still like where the Horned Frogs sit in pilot?
I do. I mean, obviously there's some other contenders, Houston being another in the mix. TCU has the number 18 recruiting class in the country right now, Lance. That's the highest that they've ever been in the 24/7 sports recruiting rankings. And they have Cordell Russell in the fold, a 6'2", 200-pound dynamic pass catcher out of Mesquite, North Mesquite, who's going to play in the All-America Bowl as well. So if TCU can add Mikael Harrison Pilot to Cordell Russell and some of the other guys that they have in the fold, those are guys that can keep this offense potent for years to come. I like where TCU stands. Visited several times during the season. He's from the same high school as TCU's top receiver, Quentin Johnson. They love the way that TCU has developed him. So I think that TCU's in a good spot there for Mikael Harrison Pilot, but not hearing that it's a lock or anything. So we'll see what happens going into his decision.
Let's move on. Jamari Johnson has been committed to Louisville. Do you still like where the Cardinals sit with him? He's planning on making a firm announcement at the All-American Bowl. What's the latest in his recruitment as obviously a decision nears?
Yeah, 6'5", 250-pound pass catcher. I think you also got to keep an eye on Oregon for Jamari Johnson. Took some visits out to the Eugene campus during the fall, and that's a program that's certainly one that he's been impressed by here late in his process. So long-time commit to Louisville. Louisville's kind of struggled to hang on to a few of their commits late in the cycle, losing Reuben Owens, losing DeAndre Moore. This is one that they certainly have to guard here down the stretch as well, as Oregon tries to put the finishing touches on a recruiting class that currently checks in at number 11. They're in on a lot of guys down the stretch. Ashton Porter announcing his decision at the Under Armour All-America game. Nicholas Harbor, the number 1 ranked athlete in the country, he's going to take his official visit in January, as reported by Brian Doan, who was with him at the Under Armour All-America game. Roderick Pleasant, one of the fastest defensive backs in the country, took an official visit in November. Still on the board for Oregon as well. So the Ducks are still working in 2023, and Jamari's someone else that they could add to the fold.
The next guy making an announcement, offensive lineman Caden Jones, big offensive lineman Caden Jones out of the state of Louisiana. You have your crystal ball in for the Florida Gators to land Jones' service. Do you still like where Florida stands? What's the outlook on his recruitment with the All-American Bowl coming up soon?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to Florida and Texas A&M, and still hearing good things this morning about Florida's position for Caden Jones. Look forward to seeing him at check-in later in the day. Maybe that intel will change, because I know Texas A&M has a lot going for him. They had the last official visit. He's got a lot of family ties to the school and people around him that are also very high on the Aggies. So Texas A&M, they have the number 13 class in the country. When you look at pound for pound recruiting rankings, it's even higher than that. And Florida sitting at number 12, just ahead of Texas A&M. Offensive line, a major point of emphasis for them this cycle as they try and shore up the trenches on both sides of the ball. Have Roderick Carney in the fold. Caden would certainly be a big addition to what they already have at the point of attack, and a guy that Billy Napier was on early with all his Louisiana connections from the University of Louisiana. They got him to camp. They've had him in camp. Got him back for an official visit. So Gators and Aggies battling for one of the specimen offensive linemen in the country here down the stretch.
Yeah, and you've said on this show before that for Florida to ultimately reach the level they want to reach towards the top of the SEC, they have to beat other SEC contenders on the recruiting trail. And if they're able to beat Texas A&M, that would be a nice box check there for Billy Napier. And again, would go into beating other SEC contenders on the trail for obviously a big time and a big man on the offensive line. So let's move now to the defensive side of the ball. Tyler Scott, a cornerback. What's the latest with his recruitment? Taking a bunch of visits. I know Auburn, I think, leads the crystal ball right now. What's the latest with his recruitment and where he currently sits?
Yeah, at one point committed to Arkansas State. Tyler Scott was one of the big senior risers, ultimately also strongly considering Alabama, Texas, USC, and Michigan alongside Auburn. But I like the Tigers here, led by Zach Etheridge. Efforts on the recruiting trail, got an official visit during Halloween weekend. So this is one where that interim staff really held Auburn in strong position for the new staff, which also includes Zach Etheridge and Cadillac Williams to come in and help close it out strong. Auburn has the number 20 class in the country right now. They flipped Keldrick Falk from Florida State late. They flipped Deron Reed from LSU late. They flipped Kayan Lee from Ohio State late. Sylvester Smith, a former Tennessee commit that they flipped late. Connor Liu, who's going to be here at the All-America Bowl, at one point committed to Miami. They flipped him. Colton Hood, they flipped from Michigan State. Whole lot of flipping going on for Auburn. Hank Brown was a quarterback that was committed to Hugh Freeze at Liberty. And now you have Tyler Scott, who's going to announce his college decision at the game. I think that he ends up at Auburn. Auburn has the number 20 class in the country right now, and I think they're still moving on up, Lance.
Yeah, and you've talked about just how good a job Cadillac Williams did in transitioning from Brian Harsin to ultimately Hugh Freeze, and how he was able to not just keep Auburn's class together, but help build Auburn's class in the process of it. And obviously staying on staff is helping Hugh Freeze. I mean, Hugh Freeze even said it in his initial press conference that Auburn kind of has now 2 head coaches, right, to go out on the recruiting trail. And you're seeing that obviously pay off for the Tigers and Hugh Freeze in a big way, finishing with, or at least at the moment right now, with a top 25 class, even after going through a coaching change. One other guy we want to discuss that's making an announcement, Jelani McDonald, and he was one time committed to Oklahoma State, then the tide seemed to change towards Texas. I know TCU was involved in that one too. What's the latest with McDonald, who's a very hot commodity for a couple teams in the Big 12?
Yeah, two-way player, plays quarterback on the prep level, projects to linebacker on the next level, but could also, athletic enough to certainly play safety, rover, help you be versatile on the back end of your defense. A top 100 recruit for us in the 24/7 Sports rankings. Out of Waco Connolly, there's 3 schools here. He's a former Oklahoma State commit that also took official visits in December to TCU and Texas. My crystal ball is on Texas for Jelani McDonald. The Longhorns have the number 3 recruiting class in the country, Lance. They're looking for their second straight top 5 haul. And that's where my prediction's at. I'm still not sleeping on Oklahoma State. That was his first love. That's a program that he's been excited about throughout his process. So we'll see if the Cowboys can get him back in the fold. But I like Texas there, Lance. And there's another prospect that's going to announce at this game. He's in the 2024 class. It's Peyton Woodyard. He's the number 2 safety in the 24/7 Sports Composite team recruiting rankings. My crystal ball is on Georgia. When this young man put out his top 7 in mid-December, Texas wasn't even in there. But talking to sources over the last couple days, Lance, Texas is now considered the team to beat. Georgia's still hanging around in there, fighting, battling, long-standing relationships with that Georgia staff. Fran Brown, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart. He's been to Georgia several times, including the win over Tennessee. But Texas making a late charge here. They had him on campus in the summer. Blake Gideon, Steve Sarkisian impressed them then. And it sounds like the Longhorns and what they're offering is impressing Peyton Woodyard now here late in his process here, as Texas will be trying to get a 3rd straight top 5 recruiting class in 2024. Peyton Woodyard, of course, helped St. John Bosco win a national championship, state championship this year, broke up 7 passes, which led their football team, had over 50 tackles, which ranked 5th on their team, but a rangy, instinctive football player that would be a massive addition. Ohio State fighting hard for him as well. But a lot of Texas buzz going into his decision. He's going to play in this game next year, but announcing his decision this year.
Yeah, Peyton Woodyard, obviously a name to know for 2024, a really talented prospect on the defensive side of the ball. Texas right now, a top 20 class in 2024. Only 2 commits, obviously very early in the 2024 process. But like you said, they would in 2024 be fighting for a 3rd straight top 5 finish, and Woodyard would go a long way in reaching that ultimate goal. So Steve, obviously you're in San Antonio, excuse me. You have to get ready to head on over for All-American Bowl check-ins. The game coming up later this week, I believe on Saturday. Correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot to do this week, a lot to see. A shorter episode of Wiltfong Whiparound today. But before we go, I do want to ask you, committed or uncommitted, who are some names that you have your eyes on? Who are some guys that you have your eyes on that you're really looking forward to seeing at the All-American Bowl practices this week and ultimately at the game?
Yeah, man, this roster is loaded. So many of the nation's best high school football players are coming to San Antonio for the 22nd All-America Bowl. And I think you start with Alabama's class, Lance. It's number 1 in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings. It's the 2nd highest ranked class in 24/7 Sports history when you're looking at their total score going back to 2010. Only Texas A&M's haul last year ranked higher. You have Caleb Downs, the number 1 safety in the country. Number 6 player overall, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite team recruiting rankings. 17 career interceptions, 7 pick sixes. I think I may not have done that just 19 career interceptions, 7 career pick sixes, excuse me. Also just a phenomenal offensive player for Mill Creek High, helped lead them to a state championship. He's going to be an instant impact player for Alabama. Last night, the 24/7 Sports crew got together and said, we were kind of discussing who's going to be the week's alpha dog. And I really had it down to 3 names. I got Caleb Downs. I got Keon Keeley, who's also committed to Alabama, the number 1 edge rusher in the country. Will Anderson destroyed this event several years ago, was just unblockable. Him and Brian Brzee were just outstanding that year. But Will Anderson had one of the best All-America Bowl performances I've seen in San Antonio, and I've been coming to this game since 2007, Lance. I think Keon Keeley could have that type of performance this week. And Damon Wilson, who's committed to Georgia, has some of the best pass rushing traits in the country as well. Georgia has the number 2 class in the country. So those are the 3 guys that I kind of put in the discussion as alpha dog for the week. Certainly you have Dante Moore, the highest ranked quarterback that's competing in an all-star game at various settings, a two-time state champ, Detroit high school football legend. I'm excited to talk to him today and see what led to him picking UCLA beyond just the general comments that we got right after he announced his flip from Oregon. But it's a really good quarterback room. Lincoln Kienholz, I'm extremely intrigued by. Ohio State flipped him from Washington late. Be my first time seeing Lincoln Kienholz. Ohio State as the number 6 ranked recruiting class in the country. Obviously, they're going to have a quarterback competition next year to replace C.J. Stroud. Where does the true freshman Kienholz fit in? A 3-time state champ from South Dakota who also shines in basketball and baseball. Coming to Ohio State. Miami, Samson Okunlola is the jewel of their class, 5-star offensive tackle. Several Miami guys are here from the nation's number 4 recruiting class. Texas, Anthony Hill, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, Tassili Akana, part of that number 3 ranked recruiting class from Texas. That's going to come here and compete. So a lot of talented players that can be on the field going head-to-head in full pads, and you want to stay locked into 24/7 sports for more. But bringing it full circle on that, Caleb Downs is instinctive a defensive back as there is in the country, always in the right place at the right time. Brandon Huffman, who's kind of a historian on the recruiting trail, I was like, who can a DB be the alpha dog of the All-America Bowl? And they brought up Eric Berry. They said Eric Berry was as good as
there's a blast for the past name right there.
Yeah, the year Eric Berry was at the All-America Bowl, and I was there too. Had a phenomenal showing. So can Caleb Downs have an Eric Berry type showing here in San Antonio? We'll see this week, but I wouldn't put anything past him. I think he's going to win All-America Bowl Player of the Year.
Yeah, and obviously Alabama fans hope Caleb Downs has an Eric Berry-like impact for the Crimson Tide, both next year and obviously the years moving
and they want Caden Proctor to have an Evan Neal-like impact as they try and replace 4 starters on the offensive line. I know that. I mean, this was an important offensive line class for Alabama, Lance, and for them to flip Proctor from Iowa late, and then the returns from our guys that are out at the Under Armour game have been strong with Olaus Alinen, who's Andrew Ivins said at 6'7" hit his head on the door walking in the check-in. He's been phenomenal. But they're going to be counting on guys like Wilkin Formby, Caden Proctor. They're going to count on a true freshman to play meaningful downs for a team that has national championship aspirations. So excited to see Caden Proctor out here as well.
Yeah, Alabama well represented in both the Under Armour All-American game as well as in the All-American Bowl. Obviously, to no one's surprise there, Alabama always well represented in these games. But like Steve said, make sure to stay locked into 247sports.com for the latest on the Under Armour All-American game that's taking place tomorrow, as well as the All-American Bowl that's taking place Saturday, January 7th. You don't want to miss any of it. Live updates as the week goes on from practice and obviously from the games as well. But Steve, that'll do it for today's episode. I know you have a lot to do with the All-American Bowl. You got to go to check-in, a lot of players to see, a lot of recruits to talk to. Thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Wiltfong Whiparound.